Noonan is the CEO of CyberSheath Services International. He's also an expert on cybersecurity. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, John.
So there's a couple of lines which really stand out in this new report from CrowdStrike. The first being just how dominant China is when it comes to hacking. They report in 2022, China was observed targeting nearly all 39 global industry sectors and 20 geographic regions which CrowdStrike tracks. So, China spy balloon, that made a lot of headlines, but cyber hacking seems to be where the real action actually is. And China's hackers, according to this report anyway, are getting a lot better each passing year.
John, I think that report is largely confirmation of what many of us in the industry have understood for decades now. And I think you're exactly right that the spy balloon was interesting, but this cybersecurity threat from China is far more pervasive, far more persistent, and in the long term, I think potentially far more lethal. And it's the bigger threat for sure.
And there was another line in this report from CrowdStrike, which is that overall, all cybercrimes last year were faster and more complex operations. The average e-crime breakout time is now 84 minutes. But this is the thing. 71% of attacks CrowdStrike intelligence detected were malware-free, which means, in other words, hackers gain access to the networks using legitimate credentials and passwords. This seems to be the ongoing weak spot in every network out there. It's our own stupidity, our own gullibility.
Well, it is, John. I mean, it's a great point, the fact that using valid credentials that are recognized by the network or the device that you're accessing and are supposed to work and are supposed to grant access. And that's, it ties back to the China point. So that China globally is harvesting incredible amounts, untold amounts of these credentials and this kind of data. And they're using that against us. And largely our defenses across the globe, here in the United States, but really everywhere, are not attuned to these kinds of attacks yet in a way to stop that. So China is actually, in many cases, using valid credentials to, quote unquote, break into these networks. So these attacks go largely and often undetected, and China is a very, very persistent adversary. So using these kinds of credentials without using any kind of malware or something that traditional defense would detect is incredibly effective.
Yeah, last November, FBI Director Christopher Wray told lawmakers that China's Vause hacking program is the world's largest, and they've stolen more Americans' personal and business data than every other nation combined. So what we're talking about here is essentially what a combination of government hackers and what has often been referred to as a bunch of useful idiots, freelancers who hack sort of on behalf of the government. So where does TikTok, though, fit into this picture? Because they're not actively hacking, but there is concern about cybersecurity and what they could reveal to the Chinese government.
Right. I mean, it's just another element of the pervasive and persistent threat that is China. And so it's another kind of tool in their tool belt, another weapon in their arsenal to harvest data, to harvest what kind of information our children are interacting with, the kinds of videos they like, the kind of content they like, their location data. And if you fast forward and kind of play that out over time, eventually they will connect the dots on who these people are interacting with TikTok. These people will go on to have careers over a very long period of time. They'll be in corporations, they'll be in government positions, and China will have all this potentially compromising data that they will find a way to use against those who are interacting with the TikTok platform. So it's an incredibly ingenious way of further harvesting greater intelligence for ill will.
Are you sort of getting the impression you're saying that's what TikTok was essentially made to do?
That's what it feels like, and I certainly wouldn't take any other approach than to take a defensive and aggressive approach, because we've seen what China's done. We had many years ago when President Obama was in office, there was a little bit of an agreement of a no hack agreement, but that largely fell by the wayside. And so I don't even know if it's a case of trust but verify. I think we should very much be on the defensive and recognize them for the adversary they are. In the case of TikTok, I would very much view it that way.
Because even when there are guarantees that that data will be protected, Yahoo sold out dissidents years ago, handing over all their information on dissidents in China to Beijing.
That's right. And I think the guarantees are at the end of the day, I mean, that's part of, again, to China's advantage is that so many companies around the globe have a significant economic interest within China, whether they're doing business there or they have the ability to sell data to China or export goods that are manufactured in China. There's so many commercial interests in China that it's very difficult for these commercial entities to push back and kind of wave the flag of their particular nation and think national security first. And so I think at the end of the day, that's another advantage that's working in China's favor is their incredible economic power.
Eric, it's been good to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.